The alley behind Giovanni's restaurant was dimly lit by a single street lamp, casting long shadows between the old brick buildings. Marcus Bennett stood quietly in the doorway, watching as one of his employees knelt beside two small children who had taken shelter under a makeshift cardboard lean-to. At 37, Marcus owned a chain of upscale restaurants across the city. But tonight he was conducting one of his regular undercover visits to observe how his businesses truly operated when management was not watching. He had been about to leave through the back exit when he noticed the blonde waitress who had served him earlier that evening. Her name was Sarah, he remembered from her name tag. She appeared to be in her mid-20s with kind eyes and a gentle manner that had impressed him during his meal. Now, as he watched from the shadows, Marcus saw her reaching into a canvas bag and carefully pulling out several dinner rolls wrapped in a clean kitchen towel. "Here you go, Emma and Jake," Sarah said softly, her voice carrying clearly in the quiet alley. "These are still warm from tonight's service." The two children, who appeared to be perhaps 7 and 4 years old, looked up at Sarah with expressions of pure gratitude. The older child, a boy wearing a thin gray hoodie and worn sneakers, reached out eagerly for the bread. The younger girl, clutching a small stuffed animal, smiled shrilly as Sarah gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Thank you, Miss Sarah," the boy said politely. "Emma was really hungry, but I told her you would come like you always do." Marcus felt his chest tighten as he began to understand what he was witnessing. This waitress, who earned barely above minimum wage at his restaurant, was using her own money and resources to feed homeless children who lived in the alley behind his building. "Jake, have you two been staying warm enough?" Sarah asked, settling down on her knees so she could speak to them at eye level. "I brought an extra blanket from home if you need it." The little girl, Emma, nodded solemnly. "We've been okay. Jake takes good care of me. He says, we have to be brave until Mama comes back." Sarah's expression grew tender as she looked at these two children who were facing circumstances no child should have to endure. "You are both very brave. And Jake, you are an excellent big brother." Marcus remained hidden, transfixed by this scene of compassion playing out just yards from his restaurant's back door. He had never noticed these children before, had never realized that people were living in such desperate conditions, so close to his profitable business. "Miss Sarah," Jake said quietly, "the man in the fancy suit came around again today asking questions about you. He seemed nice, but we did not tell him anything because you said it was our secret." Sarah's face grew concerned. "What did he look like, Jake?" "Tall with dark hair. He was wearing a really expensive jacket. He asked the people at the sandwich shop if they knew about a lady who comes to help kids in the alley." Marcus realized with a start that Jake was describing him. Earlier that day, he had been asking local business owners about reports of someone providing food to homeless individuals in the area. He had assumed it was some kind of unauthorized charity operation that might reflect poorly on his restaurant's reputation. Now understanding the truth, Marcus felt ashamed of his initial reaction. This young woman was not running some questionable operation. She was performing simple acts of human kindness for children who had nowhere else to turn. "Do not worry about the man in the suit," Sarah told the children gently. "I will handle that right now. Let me see if you two need anything else." Sarah spent several more minutes with Emma and Jake, checking to make sure they had adequate shelter and warmth for the night. She gave them a small flashlight and promised to return the next evening with more food. As Sarah finally stood to leave, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He stepped out of the shadows and approached slowly, not wanting to startle the children or put Sarah in an uncomfortable position. "Excuse me," Marcus said softly, his hands visible and his manner as non-threatening as possible. Sarah spun around immediately, placing herself protectively between Marcus and the children. Her eyes widened with recognition as she realized this was the same well-dressed customer who had dined at her table earlier that evening. "Sir, I can explain," Sarah began, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. "There is nothing to explain," Marcus replied gently. "I am Marcus Bennett. I own Giovanni's restaurant and I have been watching what you do here every night." Sarah's face went pale and Marcus could see her calculating whether she was about to lose her job for taking leftover food from the restaurant. "Mr. Bennett, I know I should have asked permission before taking the bread, but these children were hungry and the food would have just been thrown away," Sarah said quickly. "I can pay you back for whatever it cost." Marcus looked past Sarah to where Emma and Jake were watching this exchange with worried expressions. These children clearly depended on Sarah's kindness. and the thought of them going hungry because of corporate policies made him feel sick. "Sarah," Marcus said carefully, "you are not in trouble. In fact, I want to understand more about what you are doing here. Would you mind if I sat down and talked with all of you?" For the next hour, Marcus learned about Emma and Jake's situation. Their mother had suffered a mental health crisis and had been hospitalized 3 months earlier. With no other family to care for them, the children had been living on the streets, too afraid of the foster care system to seek official help. Sarah had discovered them 2 weeks earlier and had been quietly providing food, blankets, and whatever support she could manage on her modest salary. She had been researching social services and trying to figure out how to help them officially without separating them or putting them in danger. "I know I should have reported this to someone," Sarah admitted to Marcus, "but I was afraid they would be split up or placed somewhere unsafe. I have been trying to find a family member or a trustworthy guardian who could take them both." Marcus looked at this remarkable young woman who was sacrificing her own resources to care for children she barely knew and felt. Something shift inside his chest. He had spent years focused on profit margins and business expansion. But Sarah had reminded him of something far more important. "Sarah," Marcus said finally, "what if I told you that I want to help, not just with food, but with finding a real solution for Emma and Jake?" Over the following weeks, Marcus worked closely with Sarah to navigate the complex world of social services and child welfare. Using his resources and connections, they were able to locate Emma and Jake's aunt, who lived in a nearby state and had been desperately searching for the children since their mother's hospitalization. The reunion was emotional and beautiful, with the aunt expressing overwhelming gratitude to Sarah for keeping the children safe during their most vulnerable time. She immediately began the process of gaining legal guardianship and invited Sarah to stay in touch with Emma and Jake as they adjusted to their new life. But Marcus's relationship with Sarah had evolved into something neither of them had expected. Her compassion and selflessness had opened his heart in ways he had not thought possible. He found himself looking forward to their daily conversations and deeply admiring her strength and kindness. "Sarah," Marcus said one evening as they walked through the now empty alley where Emma and Jake had once sheltered, "I need to tell you something." Sarah looked up at him with those same kind eyes that had first captured his attention. "What is it, Marcus?" "When I first started investigating the reports about someone feeding homeless people behind my restaurant, I was worried about liability and public image," Marcus admitted. "I was thinking like a businessman, not like a human being." Sarah smiled gently. "You were protecting your livelihood. That is understandable. But you showed me something I had forgotten." Marcus continued. "You showed me that success means nothing if we do not use it to help others. You changed how I see everything." Months later, Marcus and Sarah stood together at the grand opening of the Bennett Foundation's first transitional housing facility for families experiencing homelessness. The facility would provide not just shelter, but comprehensive support services to help families rebuild their lives. Emma and Jake were among the honored guests, now thriving in their aunt's care, but still maintaining their special friendship with Sarah. They had insisted on helping cut the ribbon, wanting to be part of the solution for other children facing similar struggles. "You know," Sarah said to Marcus as they watched Emma and Jake play with other children in the facility's safe courtyard, "I never imagined that hiding bread in my bag would lead to all this." Marcus took her hand gently, marveling at how this woman had transformed not just his business practices, but his entire understanding of what mattered in life. "I never imagined that following an employee into an alley would lead me to fall in love," Marcus replied softly. Sarah smiled, the same radiant expression that had first drawn him to her. "Love has a way of finding us when we are focused on loving others." As they watched the sunset paint the sky above their new facility, Marcus reflected on how a simple act of kindness in a dark alley had illuminated the path to a completely different kind of life. Sarah had not just been hiding bread in her bag that night. She had been carrying hope, compassion, and love.